Hello and welcome. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with Sunday Times bestselling author Jane Corry as she launches her new book, The Lies We Tell, on June the 24th. This is a psychological thriller about a woman whose 15-year-old son tells her that she has committed a murder. So what would you do as his mother? I don't want to say too much else because there's so much in it. I might give something away. So Jane's a good friend of the society. She's been a member for years. And she's a former magazine journalist who's also spent 3 years working as writer in residence of a high security prison for men, which I'm sure was a real education. And June was a tutor in creative writing at Oxford University as well, and is a regular contributor to the Daily Telegraph and My Weekly magazine. Her previous Penguin books have all been in the Sunday Times top 10, which is a real achievement. So Jane, welcome. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's lovely to have you here. I mean, I read your book over 3 days, and the only reason it took me that long was because I have children. I had to keep going off and
Well,
cooking and
that's a
things.
huge compliment. I remember those days when mine were smaller. Yes.
Honestly, I spent the whole time sort of flicking, and you don't even notice the words. It's like the words get in the way because you want the story to go faster and faster because it's exciting. So, where
Thank you.
did the idea come from?
Well, my children are grown up now, but I brought up my youngest on my own from the age of 14. And it was quite a challenging time. He didn't break the law, but I must admit, I did wonder what I would do if something like that happened, because I think you become very aware of it, especially in the last few years. And I have a gap between my youngest and my older two, and there seemed to be more going on in teenage world when I brought up my youngest, and what one was aware of some people's children going off the rails. So it did make me wonder.
Yeah, I think that's been going on for centuries, actually. It's just
Yeah.
probably some of the things that they're using now are a bit different than anything were in Tudor times.
The other thing is that I brought up my youngest in a town, and the older two were in the country. We were in the middle of nowhere, and there weren't the worries that there are when you've got lots of things going on around you. Yes.
Yeah, and I think the youngest as well. I mean, you don't concentrate on them quite the same, do you?
It is a bit different. I have to say, though, he didn't break the law. It's always the what if in a writer's mind that gets a story going, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So how did you take that and then develop it into such a fantastic story?
Well, I really wanted to follow that tension between parents when they bring up children, and how very often the father wants to do something differently from the mother, or vice versa. And I also wanted to explore the fact that parents have a past. We're meant to be a bit like politicians and have a blanket clean past, but actually that isn't always the case. So Sarah, the mother, again, I don't want to give away the plot, but she has a past, and so does Tom. And slowly their own child finds out about this past. And I suppose when I'm writing a novel, I get the main idea in my head. It just kind of drops in, and then I people it with characters. I think of the right kind of people that would work for it, and people that are going to be different enough from each other so that the reader can easily identify between them. And then as I'm writing it, more ideas come, more twists come. And it's like a generic snowball. The more you write, the more it rolls and you get more ideas. And then at the end, you're left with a very rough draft, and you go back and tidy it up. I actually do several revisions before it goes to my editor.
Yeah, I can imagine. But I mean, the thing that's really clever in is the revelation after revelation after revelation. I mean, they just keep coming at you, and you go, "No, I didn't see that coming." And so, how do you structure that? Because that's actually quite a difficult thing to do, to keep building
Yes.
and not give everything away at the start.
I do plot quite tightly now at the beginning, which is something I never used to do. My editor, who's absolutely brilliant, is a great believer in plotting in quite a detailed way. But we have an agreement that my characters might well do something that takes them off the plot line, because that's what characters do if they're going to breathe. And so sometimes they do something completely different from the main plot. But you asked me how I did, I'm very aware of the importance of pace in a book. So you've got to get that right balance between allowing a reader to enjoy the book and at the same time bring in enough so they're not bored. And in every chapter, I don't necessarily have a big revelation, but I have something that makes people want to go forward.
Yeah, it's that, isn't it? It's just these little
Mm.
hooks that make it, oh, what's that?
Mm.
That's new. What's that mean?
And I think my training as a journalist helped me with that, because we were taught to get the story in at the beginning, and keep the pace going. One of the big differences between being a magazine journalist and an author is that you need to create interest between the reader and the character before you plunge that character into crisis. So I always say to people, it's a bit like, if you see somebody going into an ambulance when you're driving past, you are worried about them because you're a good person. But if you knew that person being taken into an ambulance, then you really worry about them. So I want my reader to know that person who's going into an ambulance, but beforehand, so that they then really want them to be all right when a crisis occurs to them.
Yeah, and that's, you're very clever at that, actually, because the backgrounds are quite have got some quite shocking bits to them in terms of the characters and what's happened to them, and you can see why they're the way they are, but also they're not exactly totally innocent, either of them.
No, they're not. And I think that's the interesting bit, that parents do have pasts. I know mine have been quite taken aback when I've mentioned some of the rock groups I went to when I was their age. I think perhaps it held me more respect when when I was telling you about some punk rock group I saw in the late 70s. But actually, to have a past where your children might be shocked is something else, and that's what I wanted to bring in.
Yes, and you do that well, because he is shocked despite what he's been through. But actually, what you end up with is the feeling of forgiveness for yourself as well
Yes,
as others,
yes,
and
yeah.
that came through very.
And I
Was that important to you, that sense of forgiveness?
very, forgiveness is important to me. I think that if we don't forgive people, we can't expect to be forgiven ourselves. But secondly, and I think the last year and a half has shown this, kindness is very important. And now kindness is cool. But actually, when I was growing up, it wasn't always cool. And I try to be a kind person because it seems to be the right thing to do. And I suppose at the end, I want my characters to have learned a lot along the way and be kind to each other.
Yes, and that comes across at the end. It's I don't want to say too much without going to ruin the.
No, don't.
You don't want to say anything that's going to take away the thrill for the reader. So, who was your favourite character then in writing?
Oh, I think it has to be Sarah, the mother, because she would do almost anything, but she knows that she knows she's going against what she believes in if she's going to do that. So it's a very difficult decision for her to make.
Yeah, no, you can see that she has some very difficult decisions in the book altogether, I think.
But I also feel sorry for her husband, Tom, because he tries to be a very good man, and it's not easy for him either.
No, absolutely. And I think that because you tell the whole story from the two points of view, from Tom and from Sarah.
Yes. Yeah.
So you're looking into their marriage from both angles.
Very much.
Which is really interesting. Where do you think you get that insight into how a man like that thinks? Because he's quite a different person to you. Because I know
yes,
you know that you're very creative, and he's an actuary, isn't he? That's right, an actuary.
Yeah.
And,
yes.
I'm trying to think of his accountant, but he was an actuary, and he's so mathematical and literal.
Yes.
That's so different to you. How did you see into his head like that?
Well, my editor said to me, how did I feel about having one of the viewpoints to be male? And first I was a bit worried about that. And then I thought, well, actually, I could do it from a slightly geeky point of view. Somebody who's, slightly eccentric, somebody where numbers are their thing, and they're so not my thing, that actually sometimes it can be easier to write from the point of view of somebody who's very different from you. So that's what I did with Tom. I made him a numbers man, and I made him a man who really wanted a family, because he hadn't had much of a family life himself, nor had Sarah. So they were drawn together by their lack of family as children because of two very different reasons. And I wanted that to create some tension. And Tom felt very real to me.
Yeah, he comes across as very real. It
Thank you.
really did. And also you researched the legal issues, because there's an awful lot of legal
Mhm,
issues in the book, and
mhm.
you get those across very
I have
well.
a wonderful lawyer who's an advisor. The great thing when you're researching a book is you can ring up these professional organizations or email and just say, I'm writing a novel about such and such, and I really need some advice. And they're very happy to help you, more so, I think, than maybe if you were a journalist, because they know that the real names are not being used. And I always credit them at the back. So I had this wonderful lawyer who was very kind, and I ran so much stuff past him, not just legal procedures, but how many years somebody might get for such and such a crime, or could I say this, and would this be in the right order in court? And he was really very kind. So I've credited him at the back of the book. Yeah.
That's great. So was that the only research you did, or did you do
Oh
any
no,
other?
no. I went to the Old Bailey and sat in on a couple of cases. And actually, I say that was for the book for the year before, because of course when I started writing this, it was lockdown. But I remember, that experience of being in the Old Bailey brought it all back to me, because as a journalist, I spent some time in court doing court reporting.
Right.
So that was there all the time. My experience of prison will never leave me. So although there's not a great deal about characters being in prison, there is there is some. So it's a kind of underlying background that you need to have been in a prison to describe.
Yes.
So some of the research I've already done and was in my head. I also did some research into the 70s and the 80s, because one of my characters grows up then. For me, it's a mixture of writing and research, and often the research can give you ideas for the next part of the plot.
Yeah, no, it was all great. So,
Thank you.
what are the themes that you really wanted to come out from the book? Was there was obviously the forgiveness and that. So we talked about the sort of relationship between somebody who's very numeric and somebody who's very artistic. Was there anything else that you really wanted the book to show for you?
Yes, I wanted that passion to have a child, because Sarah and Tom spent a long time trying to have Freddie. And that's really perhaps one of the reasons why Sarah, I don't want to say she went too far, because she might not have gone too far, but why Sarah would do almost anything for her son. So that desire to have a baby and that continual quest to have a baby was actually very important. But I think also that huge effort to try and keep a family going, to keep all the relationships balanced, which is a very difficult, complex one.
Absolutely. I think for most people, I think there's a lot people can empathize with in that book.
Thank you.
Real. So, well, I mean, I'm really excited for you for the launch on the 24th. So,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no. So people should go out, buy the book for the weekend, because you'll really enjoy it. You can get it on Amazon, in any bookshop, the supermarket, and online. Is that right?
Yes, thank you. Yes, and I'm thrilled that Woman and Home have reviewed it, and My Weekly, and many other magazines. That's very exciting. So
brilliant. Well done. That's great.
Thank you.
Well, as I say, I loved it, so I really hope it does well for you. And
well, that means a lot to me, because as I said, as you said, I've been a member of the SWWJ for many, many years, and I love it. It's a wonderful organization, and so I'm thrilled to be talking to your members.
No,
of whom I'm one, rather. Yes.
Well, that's brilliant, Jane. Thank you so much. Lovely to see you. And take care.
Lovely to see you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.